2.5 millennia ago, China was embroiled in the Spring and Autumn era, followed by the Warring States. The authority of the Zhou Emperor had utterly collapsed. It left a power vacuum where feudal lords engaged in incessant wars. It was a dark age of betrayal. Sons murdered fathers, ministers assassinated sovereigns. The traditional social fabric and moral order had disintegrated into what historians called the collapse of ritual and the decay of music. In the midst of this turbulent age, a man was born, Confucius. Born in 551 BC in Zhaoyi, he was the son of an aging soldier and a young mother. By the time of his birth, his family's noble lineage had withered into poverty. Bereft of his father at the age of 3, Confucius was raised in hardship by his mother. He grew up in the lower rungs of society, serving in menial roles as a keeper of granaries and a shepherd of public herds. This humble beginning allowed him to understand the suffering of the common people more deeply than any nobleman ever could. It forged his unshakable conviction: education is the ultimate equalizer. At 15, Confucius set his heart on learning. His goal was not merely to secure a livelihood, but to attain the Tao. He voraciously mastered the 6 arts of the Zhou aristocratic education: ritual, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and arithmetic. By 30, he did something revolutionary. He broke the aristocratic monopoly on knowledge. In the district of Quelli, he established a private seat of learning, pioneering the tradition of private education in Chinese history. The requirement for entry was remarkably humble, a mere token of 10 strips of dried meat. His classroom was a vast tapestry of social classes. This was his famous doctrine: in instruction, there is no separation into classes. Among them were figures like Zigong, a merchant of immense wealth; Yan Hui, who found joy in a life of radical simplicity; Zhang Gong, born of humble origins; and even Gong Yu Cheng, who had once been a prisoner. Confucius looked past a man's background, seeking only his thirst for wisdom. Legend says he taught 3,000 followers, 72 of whom became masters of 6 arts. Their legacy, preserved in the records of the grand historian, became a spiritual beacon for all future generations. But what was the core of his curriculum? It was not a technical skill, but the architecture of the soul, the art of becoming an exemplary person, a human being grounded in moral weight, ritual propriety, and profound humaneness. The doctrines of Confucius can be distilled into several core pillars. The first is Ren, or humaneness. The word Ren appears over 100 times in the Analects. Yet Confucius never offered a single rigid definition. Instead, he tailored his wisdom to the unique character of his disciples. To Fan Qi, it was to love all men. To Zhonggong, not to do to others what you would not wish done to yourself. And to Zizhuang, the practice of 5 virtues. Despite these variations, the core remains consistent. Ren is the capacity for empathy, a love that radiates outward in concentric circles. It begins with one's own kin and expands to the wider world. It is not an abstract universal love, but a practical affection that respects the natural bonds of family. Next is Li, or propriety. In his era, the practice of ritual had been distorted. Aristocrats treated it as hollow decoration, while the ordinary people saw it as an instrument of oppression. Confucius redefined it. To him, it was not mere surface ceremony, but the very foundation of social order. He famously asked, "Is it only jade and silk that we mean by ritual? Is it only bells and drums that we mean by music?" Behind the form lie human emotion and ethics. Without a heart of humaneness, the performance of ritual is meaningless. Thus he said, "If a man be without the virtues proper to humanity, what has he to do with the rights of propriety?" The relationship between Ren and Li is the heart of his thought. Ren is the inner soul, while Li is the outer manifestation. In his words, to subdue oneself and return to propriety is Ren. By restraining selfish desires and aligning one's actions with the norms of ritual, one finds the path to Ren. Furthermore, he advocated for the rectification of names. Let the ruler be a ruler, the minister a minister, the father a father, and the son a son. This has often been misunderstood as a tool for autocracy. In reality, Confucius was emphasizing reciprocal responsibility. If a ruler is not humane, he is not fit to lead. If a minister is not loyal, he has failed his duty. His focus was on responsibility, not blind obedience. However, these doctrines were not welcomed in his lifetime. Accompanied by his disciples, Confucius left the state of Lu and began a 14-year journey through various states, trying to promote his doctrines of governance to monarchs. He was almost universally rejected. In the state of Zhang, someone described him as looking like a homeless dog. Upon hearing this, Confucius smiled and said, "That is quite true." When he was trapped between Chan and Tai, his food supplies ran out and his disciples were too weak to stand. Yet he never stopped singing and playing his lute. The master was not unaware that his doctrines were difficult to implement in an age of upheaval. Yet he chose to remain steadfast. In 484 BC, at the age of 68, Confucius was invited back to Lu. He no longer sought official position, but instead devoted his energy to his private seat of learning and editing ancient texts. He compiled the Book of Odes and the Book of Documents, refined the Book of Rites and the Classic of Music, interpreted the I Ching, and composed the Spring and Autumn Annals. He described himself, "I transmit, but do not create. I believe in and love the ancients." He did not invent a new ideology. Rather, he systematized the fragmented heritage of the past, ensuring the survival of a cultural tradition that was on the verge of vanishing. In doing so, he laid a cultural foundation for China that would span millennia. In 479 BC, Confucius passed away at the age of 73. His disciples built huts near his tomb and mourned for 3 years. They eventually compiled his wisdom into the Analects and spread his ideas across the land. Confucius was frustrated in life, but in death his teachings became the very soul of 2,000 years of Chinese civilization. In Confucius's lifetime, his doctrines were merely one voice among many. It was an era that witnessed a surge of diverse philosophical schools, as they debated and contended with one another in what history calls the 100 schools of thought. Beyond Confucianism, there were Mohists, Taoists, Legalists, and many others, collectively known as the 9 sects and 10 schools. Each school presented its own blueprint for social salvation, in an attempt to persuade the feudal lords of the era. In this intense intellectual environment, Confucianism faced harsh criticism and fierce competition. The first major challenge came from Mohism. Its founder Mozi criticized the Confucian rituals as being too complex and the funeral customs too wasteful. While he agreed that a lack of love was the problem, his solution was different, where Confucius preached graded love, starting with one's own family, while Mozi demanded universal love, to love another's father exactly as one's own. He mocked the Confucian belief in fate and dismissed their long mourning periods as a waste of a nation's resources. Taoism offered an even deeper rejection. Grounded in the principle of living in harmony with nature, Taoists hated all man-made rules. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi boldly claimed, "Exterminate benevolence and discard righteousness, and the people will return to filial piety and compassion." To the Taoists, the more the Confucians strived to subdue the self and return to propriety, the further they strayed from the natural flow of the Tao. Meanwhile, the legalists attacked from a purely pragmatic lens. Shang Yang argued that Confucianism was as antithetical to a strong state. If a nation encouraged people to study poetry and ritual instead of farming and war, it would inevitably grow weak. Han Fei, the leading legalist thinker, dismissed Confucian ethics as outdated. He compared relying on ancient virtues to trying to sail a ship on dry land, a futile effort to use the tools of antiquity to navigate the storms of the present. Amid such fierce competition, why did Confucianism ultimately emerge as the victor? The answer lies not in a superior truth, but in its profound alignment with the deep structure of traditional Chinese society, the lineage and kinship traditions. Unlike other civilizations, China preserved its strong family structures as it grew. Confucianism turned these biological instincts into an ethical system, by starting with filial piety and extending it toward loyalty and benevolence. It created a moral architecture that felt natural to a people centered on the family. Furthermore, Confucianism provided a complete ethical and political framework. It linked the character of the individual to the harmony of the family, the rules of the state, and the peace of the world. Mohism's universal love proved too demanding for human nature. People naturally loved their kin more than strangers. Taoism offered no practical way to run a country, and the harsh laws of the legalists lacked the moral warmth needed for long-term support. Confucianism offered a middle path, a vision that was both high-minded and practical for daily life. The victory of Confucianism did not happen overnight. It was a 300-year evolution between the death of Confucius and the imperial decree of the Han dynasty. The school survived by adapting. Scholars like Zunzi absorbed the institutional logic of the legalists, while later thinkers like Dong Zhongshu integrated cosmic theories to create a grand system of mutual interaction between heaven and mankind. Confucianism did not just defeat its competitors, it outlasted them by evolving, eventually becoming the very soul of the Chinese Empire. After the death of Confucius, his thoughts were systematized into a comprehensive set of social rules. However, it was during the Han dynasty that Confucianism was elevated from a private school of thought to the official state ideology. A defining moment occurred in 195 BC. The founder of the Han dynasty, Emperor Gaozu, made a pilgrimage to Khufu to offer the great sacrifice to Confucius. This founding emperor chose to honor a scholar who had been dead for 3 centuries. He did this instead of merely celebrating his own military triumph. This act demonstrated the immense moral authority that Confucianism had already gathered among both the common people and the ruling elite. From that point on, imperial favor grew steadily through the Tang, Yuan, and Ming dynasties as they bestowed increasingly grand titles upon the master. By the Qing dynasty, the rituals for Confucius were raised to the same rank as those offered to heaven itself. The Confucian temple evolved from a humble shrine into a vast national system of family, state, and academic temples. These were not merely places of worship, but centers of learning where temple and academy became one. Every district established a temple paired with a government school, ensuring that every scholar who studied the classics also paid homage to the master. As the ancients noted, it is not the man we worship, but the way he represented. We can understand the core of this way through 3 distinct layers. First, family ethics. Filial piety is the bedrock and the starting point of all morality. Confucius believed that one cannot truly love others without first loving their own parents. As recorded in the Analects, Confucius asked if filial piety and fraternal submission are not the root of all benevolent actions. This virtue came with strict requirements. Children were to support their parents and observe a 3-year mourning period upon their death. To Confucius, this was a symbolic return for the first 3 years of life, when a child cannot leave the arms of its parents. This devotion extended beyond the grave through ancestor worship. Families maintained ancestral altars with continuous incense, believing that the spiritual life force of the lineage depended on the remembrance of the living. This duty to maintain the breath of the family explains the profound cultural emphasis on producing male heirs. Second, social hierarchy. Confucius envisioned a society organized by clear, orderly relationships. He advocated for the rectification of names. Let the ruler be a ruler, the minister a minister, the father a father, and the son a son. This was not meant as one-sided oppression, but as reciprocal responsibility. Later expanded into the 5 relationships, it established a hierarchy where subordination was conditional. A ruler had no claim to loyalty if he was not benevolent, and a father's authority lost its foundation if he was not loving. This dimension of mutual duty remained the heart of Confucian ethics, even when ignored by later politics. Third, the state order. Confucianism projected the logic of the family onto the nation. Just as a son owes filial piety to his father, a minister owes loyalty to his sovereign. The legitimacy of a ruler rested not on blood or force, but on virtue. Confucius said, "Government is the rectifying of the ruler. If he leads them to rectitude, who will not be rectified?" The state was to be built on morality and ritual rather than divine omens. Finally, this ideology was cemented through the imperial examination system. For over 13 centuries, this system drew the nation's brightest minds into the bureaucracy. By mastering the classics and passing the prefectural, provincial, and palace exams, even those from humble backgrounds could rise to power. This was based on the principle, if the scholar have leisure after his learning, he may take office. This system provided a channel for social mobility and ensured that the emperor shared the governance of the empire with the educated elites. Starting from the Han dynasty, Confucianism became the official state ideology. This shift raised a sharp question. Was Confucianism a moral teaching designed to elevate humanity? or was it a tool used by the ruling class to control the masses? This question is vital because many core Confucian ideas could indeed be used by rulers to maintain their power. Consider the principle of the rectification of names. Confucius originally emphasized that each person should fulfill their specific duties. However, in later political practice, this was often simplified to absolute obedience. The Han scholar Don Zhongshu introduced the three ideals, which stated that the subject is guided by the ruler, the son by the father, and the wife by the husband. This transformed the reciprocal ethics of Confucius into a system of unilateral dominance. Absolute loyalty became the duty of the subject. Even if an emperor was corrupt or cruel, the people were taught not to resist. This framework provided a moral cloak for 2,000 years of imperial autocracy. Furthermore, the famous saying, "There are three things which are unfilial, and to have no posterity is the greatest of them," became more than a family value. While it originally stressed the importance of continuing ancestral sacrifices, it evolved into a sophisticated method of social control. The pressure to marry and produce heirs forced individuals to abandon personal choices. From the perspective of the ruler, this system guaranteed a growing population for labor and war. It also bound the individual to the family, and the family to the state order. A moral discourse on filial piety thus became a practical tool for maintaining the social structure. Other examples followed this pattern. The idea that a woman's lack of talent is her virtue encouraged women to abandon education and remain within the domestic sphere. This consolidated the patriarchal family structure. Later, the scholar Zhu Xi advocated for preserve the heavenly principle and subdue human desires. This taught individuals to suppress their personal emotions and obey social norms. It discouraged people from questioning authority or seeking their own happiness. If a person felt a sense of injustice, they were taught to blame their own improper desires rather than the system itself. However, Confucianism was never merely a mouthpiece for the ruling class. A tradition of criticizing power always existed within the school. Mencius famously stated, "The people are the most important, the state comes next, and the ruler is the least important." This was a direct limit on imperial power. Centuries later, the scholar Huang Zongxi criticized the autocratic system, arguing that the people are the masters and the ruler is the guest. Many honest officials fought against corruption and the abuse of power throughout history. They were often demoted, exiled, or even executed, yet they remained steadfast in the principle of following the way rather than the ruler. Therefore, it is more accurate to view Confucianism as an intellectual tool used by different forces. In the hands of idealists, it became a weapon to pursue justice and criticize power. In the hands of rulers, it became a tool to maintain order and suppress dissent. Confucianism itself is not inherently evil, but it provides a language that is easily abused. Its complexity lies in this balance between liberation and control. Whether Confucianism is a force for good or bad often depends on who is interpreting it and who is using it. At the beginning of the 20th century, Confucianism faced its most violent criticism. With the collapse of the Qing dynasty and the abolition of the imperial exams, intellectuals of the May 4th movement argued that Confucian hierarchy and family-centered values were blocking China's path to modernization. The literary giant Lu Zong captured this sentiment in his story, A Madman's Diary. Through the voice of a madman, he wrote, "I turned to history to look for its meaning. On every page were written the words benevolence and righteousness, but after looking closely for half the night, I finally saw the truth. Written all over the book were two words, eat people." People smashed Confucian tablets, cut off their traditional braids, and advocated for a new culture to break away from the Confucian shop. After 1949, Confucianism was further marginalized. During certain historical periods, Confucius was attacked as a symbol of the feudal landlord class. Temples were destroyed and classics were burned. It seemed that Confucianism had reached its end. Yet, it never truly disappeared. Instead, it continued to shape modern Chinese life through three invisible layers. First, family ethics. Chinese people today still place immense value on filial piety. Supporting aging parents, visiting ancestral graves during the Qingming festival, and returning home for the Chinese New Year are behaviors rooted in 2,000 years of habit. China remains one of the most family-oriented societies in the world. International surveys show that the percentage of Chinese adults who believe supporting parents is an undeniable duty is significantly higher than in Western countries. While urbanization is changing the family structure, filial piety remains a core cultural gene. Second, educational obsession. The ancient creed that if the scholar have leisure after his learning, he may take office has evolved into the modern obsession with the national college entrance exam called Gaokao. Chinese parents make an extreme investment in the education of their children. They follow the belief of not losing at the starting line, and form massive armies of parents who live near schools to support their children's studies. This reflects a Confucian-style faith in changing one's fate through learning. Every June, the entire nation stops for the Gaokao. Parents wait in the heat outside exam halls, and police escort late students through traffic. This collective obsession with education has no true equivalent in other cultures. Third, interpersonal networks. The Confucian concept of the differential mode of association remains a pillar of modern life. This is a social pattern where individuals weave their interpersonal relationships like a web, starting from themselves and extending outward based on closeness. This evolved into the modern culture of interpersonal networks. While sometimes associated with corruption or backdoor deals, these social connections are also an informal mechanism of trust. When facing a crisis, a person's first instinct is often to seek help from relatives, friends, or fellow villagers rather than turning to the law. This is a natural extension of the 5 relationships in a modern setting. In the 21st century, Confucianism has regained official recognition in mainland China. The government now promotes the revitalization of traditional culture. Confucius institutes have spread worldwide, and Confucian classics have returned to school textbooks. In academia, the revival of Confucianism has emerged as a major trend. These scholars seek to create a dialogue between Confucianism and modern values like democracy and science. They argue that the Confucian ideal of benevolence can be integrated with the Western concept of individual dignity, and that ritual can be compatible with the rule of law. Confucius once said that if a man keeps cherishing his old knowledge so as to acquire new, he may be a teacher of others. To understand China today, you do not need to memorize the original texts of the Analects. You only need to look at the eyes of a Chinese father as he checks his son's exam scores. In that gaze, you will find the shadow of Confucius. Confucius described himself as a man who in his eager pursuit of knowledge forgot his food, and in the joy of its attainment forgot his sorrows. His entire life was a footnote to this statement. He dedicated himself to learning at 15 and began teaching at 30. He traveled through various states for 14 years, often facing hardship and danger, yet he never wavered in his purpose. In his later years, he returned to his home state to organize the classic texts. He continued teaching until the very last moment of his life. Confucius did not have a successful political career. He did not have a prominent family background. He never left behind any written books of his own. All he possessed was his faith in the way and his love for his students. In a world that was falling apart, he insisted on rebuilding order through education, ritual, and morality. He did not succeed during his own lifetime. However, the seeds he planted grew into a tree that has lasted for 2,000 years. Today, Confucius no longer belongs only to China. Dozens of countries around the world have built Confucian temples. Every year on September 28th, people from Khufu to Seoul, and from Singapore to San Francisco, use the same rituals to honor this teacher from 25 centuries ago. UNESCO has listed Confucius as one of the great cultural figures of the world. A man whose ambitions were repeatedly thwarted during his lifetime has finally become the shared heritage of all humanity. Perhaps this is how the way of Confucius was proven correct. It was not through conquest, but through gradual influence. It was not through political power, but through education. It was not achieved through a sudden victory, but through 2,000 years of persistence. Confucius said that a man can enlarge the way which he follows, but the way itself does not enlarge the man. This sentence contains both a simple humility and a profound confidence. 25 centuries later, that way is still being carried forward by generation after generation. Confucius was a teacher who rose from humble origins and remained steadfast through a lifetime of struggle. Today, as his music and teachings continue to resonate across the globe, his vision of an orderly and benevolent world finds its fulfillment in the persistence of his way.